It was a late evening. My apartment was quiet, and I was sitting in my chair, unwinding after a long day at work. The room had dim lighting, and I was lost in my thoughts when my phone suddenly buzzed. I wasn't expecting any calls at this hour, especially from Max. We hadn't made any plans to meet. When I looked at the screen, I saw a message from him. "I'm at your door. Open up." I was confused. We hadn't arranged to meet. I didn't even have any plans for the evening. I stood up and walked over to the peephole. In the dim hallway, I could make out a figure. It was a person standing completely still, their head hanging low. For a moment, I thought it was Max, but something about his posture felt off. He wasn't moving, like he was frozen in place. My heart started to race. I should open the door, but something was holding me back. I typed a reply. "Are you sure you're at my door?" A few seconds later, another message came. "I'm still on my way. I'll be there in 10 minutes. My fingers froze on the screen. So who was standing outside? I looked through the peephole again. Max was still there, standing motionless. My heart started to pound even faster, and an unsettling feeling crept into my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I kept staring at the figure outside my door through the peephole, still as a statue, not moving an inch. I began to type again, trying to reassure myself that this was all just some misunderstanding. "Are you sure you're not here yet?" The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as I waited for a reply. When the phone buzzed again, I eagerly grabbed it, hoping it would bring some clarity. The message was from Max, still in transit, about 10 minutes away. I blinked in confusion. That couldn't be right. He was already here, standing in front of my door, yet his message said otherwise. My hand started to tremble. Was it possible this wasn't Max? I moved back to the peephole. The figure was still standing there. For a moment, I thought I saw him move, his head shifting slightly to the side, as though listening for something. Then it happened. He slowly, deliberately, turned his head and looked directly at the peephole, staring into it. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't Max. This person, whatever it was, knew I was watching. I felt an icy chill run down my spine. I stepped back, my heart hammering in my chest. My phone buzzed again. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I was too terrified to look. What if it was a prank? What if Max had been replaced by something else entirely? But I had to know. I couldn't just leave things like this. "Who's at my door?" I typed, trying to sound braver than I felt. But there was no response. I stood frozen in place, staring at the door. The figure outside remained still, almost unnaturally so. The seconds felt like minutes, and the air in the apartment grew thick, suffocating. What should I do? Should I open the door and face whatever was standing out there? I couldn't. I stepped away from the door, my mind racing, but the thought of running away from my own apartment made no sense. I wasn't going to give in to panic. The lights in the hallway flickered, casting a fleeting shadow over the figure outside. The buzzing from my phone felt like a distant echo, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. Instead, I grabbed my camera, aiming it through the peephole, hoping that if I captured it, I could somehow make sense of what was happening. I pressed record, trying to steady my shaking hands. On the screen, the figure outside remained perfectly still, just like I saw through the peephole. But then, just as the camera zoomed in, the figure moved, shifting ever so slightly. I blinked. There was nothing there. No figure. The door, the hallway, everything was empty. I couldn't breathe. It didn't make sense. I was sure I'd seen someone. Had my mind started playing tricks on me? Was I imagining this? I pulled the camera back from my face and looked through the peephole once more. Nothing. It was completely empty. Then the scratching began. It wasn't the usual sound you'd expect to hear from a door. This was different. It was louder, more deliberate, like something was scraping against the wood, scraping with intent. The noise felt like it was coming from within the door itself, as though the thing behind it was trying to break through. My stomach turned. The scratching continued, louder and sharper, until the sound seemed to resonate deep within my chest. It was getting closer, and I could feel the vibration in my bones. The lights flickered again, this time much more violently. I jumped back, heart racing, and the door shook under the pressure of something unseen. And then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Absolute silence. I dared not move. Then, my phone buzzed once more. The silence was unbearable. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and my mind was racing. I didn't know what to do. My apartment felt wrong. The air was thick with something I couldn't explain, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. This had to be some kind of prank, right? I glanced at the door again, but nothing had changed. It was still standing there in the dim light, as if nothing had happened. I forced myself to turn around and move away from the door, stepping back into my living room. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the place. My phone vibrated again, and I looked down at the screen. It was a message from the same number, the one that had sent me the strange text earlier. Open the door. I'm here. My pulse spiked. I didn't know what to think. My first instinct was to ignore it, to shut off my phone and just pretend like everything was normal. But then, the scratching sound started again. It wasn't coming from the door this time. It was coming from inside the apartment. I froze. It was a soft, uneven scraping, like nails dragging across the floor, making its way down the hallway. I couldn't even tell if it was real or if my mind was playing tricks on me. I had to check. Slowly, I walked toward the hallway, the sound growing louder with each step. I turned the corner, and there it was. The floorboards in the hallway were scraped up, as though something had dragged itself across the wood, leaving marks behind. But there was nothing there. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the marks, waiting for something, anything, to happen. And then, just as I thought it was all in my head, something else caught my eye. At the end of the hallway, in the shadows near the closet door, something moved. A figure. Just a glimpse, but it was there. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, my mind racing with 1,000 possibilities, none of which seemed real. The lights in the hallway flickered again, and I heard the sound of footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, echoing through the silence, coming closer. My legs felt like they were made of stone, unable to move, unable to escape. Then, as if I were a puppet, my hand reached toward my phone and dialed the one number I hadn't dared to call. Max. Maybe he would know what to do. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, it clicked. The ringing stopped abruptly, and the line was silent for a moment. I stood frozen, phone to my ear, holding my breath, waiting for Max to answer. But when he finally spoke, his voice was different. It wasn't the warm, friendly tone I was used to hearing. Hello. Max's voice was hollow, distant. It sounded like he was standing far away, his voice echoing as if from a tunnel. Max. I whispered urgently, a tremor in my voice. Max, where are you? What's going on? There was a pause before he responded. I'm not sure. I'm still on my way. I felt a rush of cold panic wash over me. He was still on his way, but I had seen him at my door. He had been standing there, motionless, like a different version of himself. Suddenly, I heard something behind me. The sound of footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps, scraping against the floor, coming closer. I whipped around, my breath caught in my throat. The closet door was ajar, and from the shadows emerged a figure. But it wasn't Max. It wasn't anyone I recognized. It was me. I froze, paralyzed by fear, as the figure, my own reflection, but twisted and wrong, slowly moved toward me. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, desperately trying to distance myself from the creature that looked like me but wasn't. It stepped closer, its face blank, its eyes dark and empty. I took a sharp breath, forcing myself to look at my phone. Max was still on the line. Max. I shouted, my voice breaking. Max, help me. Please, I don't know what's happening. But there's someone here. There was a crackling sound on the phone, and for a moment, the connection seemed to flicker. Then, Max's voice came through again, softer, almost distant. I'm here, Andy. I'm with you. I turned to look at the figure again. It was inches away now, standing in the doorway, blocking my escape. But when I glanced at the phone screen, I saw something that froze me in place. The call had ended. And that's when I realized. The figure in the doorway wasn't me. It was something else. The last thing I heard was a whisper, cold and empty, coming from behind me. I'm inside. What do you think happened to me in the end? Is it really over? This story might have come to an end, but the terror doesn't stop here. If you want to hear more disturbing and creepy stories, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell icon to be the first to know when a new nightmare begins. Stay safe, and remember, never open the door to the unknown.